Well, Mike Macdonald wasting no time heading into his first offseason after his first full season as head coach of the Seahawks, making major moves, firing offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb this morning, confirming it on Seattle Sports 710 on his coach's show about an hour ago. I didn't think they would do it, but they did. How did we get here? What were Grubb's fatal flaws? Why are we back at square one today when it comes to the offensive coordinator position? And who might be next? I'll have some names for you. I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. We'll get your reactions and my thoughts on the firing of Ryan Grubb up next on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Seahawks season is over, but of course now the playoffs begin. Still live betting to be done every weekend through BetUS. And if you sign up for a new account today, they'll give you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your second and third deposits using the promo code YouTube150. Shout out to BetUS for sponsoring this episode. Well, if you listen to live post-game reaction show yesterday that was streamed on this channel, but also originated from Bryce and Ryan's channel over on the Hawk Zone Rundown, you heard extensive discussion last night about this possibility, and we've been talking about it on the show for weeks. It's been a huge topic among fans, analysts, media. Would Ryan Grubb, did he deserve a second season? And what the conclusion I came to last night was, I said it on the show, I didn't think they would do it. I thought the fact that Macdonald came out late in the week last week and defended Grubb, talked about the learning curve and how difficult it is to go from college to the pros your first time, and how he felt like he'd improved and learned and communicated well. And the fact that they put Grubb up behind the podium himself, I think it was Friday, I thought that was it didn't seem like the move an organization would make right before they fire you. But I was reminded yesterday, we talked about this on the show as well, that if you recall, when Brian Schottenheimer was fired 5-6 years ago before being replaced with ultimately Shane Waldron, that the day before he was fired, Pete Carroll was asked by a member of the media if he was going to make a change at offensive coordinator, and he said he was offended by the question. And then a day later, Schottenheimer is fired. So maybe that wasn't Pete's call. This sure sounds like Mike Macdonald's call. The one thing I was right about is I've been saying that regardless of what they ended up doing at coordinator or any other positions on the coaching staff for that matter, I thought we were going to find out swiftly that Mike Macdonald seemed to be the type of coach. We saw it with the inside linebacker group earlier in the season, that when he makes a decision that he needs something different than what he has currently on his plate to make his football team better, he will be decisive about that and make his wishes and intentions known and make that move. This clearly was a Mike Macdonald decision. He confirmed that on the radio show, saying it simply came down to a difference in identity and style and approach. Ryan Grubb couldn't give him the brand of football on offense that he desires to be complementary to the style of play defensively that he established his first year in Seattle and that he became so well known for in Baltimore and at the University of Michigan. Ultimately, I think that the fatal flaw of Ryan Grubb is he just couldn't adapt. We saw slight changes the last quarter of the season, I would say, in under center usage. Something we'd all been kind of screaming about all season long, right? We saw some uptick in play action play calls, but it never seemed like it. First of all, in the running game, we never saw any consistency in how he executed the running game or the effectiveness of it. Although that seemed to get better later in the year with Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh in place of Ken Walker. But he never seemed to dial in on an approach. And he almost took pride in the fact that, we're going to run some outside zone, some inside zone, we're going to run some gap power. But from one game to the next, it just didn't seem like they established a preference. And I think when you're trying to build a young offensive line, I think maybe they just put too much on their plate. I was there in Glendale to watch that game when Charbonnet went off, the best rushing performance of the year for the Seahawks in that game, without a doubt. And they did it by trapping, pulling. You remember the play they had the most success with that day was taking the right side and pulling them to the left side. So Mike Upati and Abe Lucas getting out in front of Zach Charbonnet. And then it was like the next week, we had never had that game plan in our playbook, ever. We saw bits and pieces of it after that. But I finally thought, hey, we found something that worked. We heard these guys all offseason use that kind of language. We need to find out what we're good at, and then we can lean into that. And just when it looked like they found something they were good at, he didn't lean into it. The other thing that I think ultimately was his downfall was his refusal to adapt to what he was seeing up front from the offensive line and help them out in any way. Early in the season, when there were all sorts of injury issues before Lucas came back, and when it was apparent that George Fant wasn't going to be healthy, and so you had to play Stone Forsythe, and then he got hurt, and then you had to play Michael Jarrell, the 6th-round rookie. Small school, big jump for him. Had to play him. Had to go to Satao Lamea, your third choice at guard going into the season. Had to pivot at the pivot when Connor Williams suddenly retired out of the bye week. Had to go to Olu Oluwatimi. There's just so much change. It was a revolving door there up front early in the season, and they were really struggling in all aspects, in interior and on the edge. And yet, we didn't see any 12 personnel. The numbers tell the story. The Seahawks were, I think, top 5 in the league. Haven't seen the final numbers, but throughout most of the season, near the top of the league in leaving their tackles on an island. So you're struggling in pass protection, and you're just gonna leave Michael Jarrell hanging out there, and even Charles Cross, who had moments this year where he struggled with some speed from the edge as well. I didn't see the kind of adaptive skills that you have to be a good coordinator in this league. Like listening to the guy talk about football, thought he had a chance to be a really good one. And he had some cool concepts in the passing game. Maybe a little more time. Maybe he would have come back with an offseason of studying. We talked last week about getting a book on opposing defenses and how once you start to see some of the divisional opponents a second time, he understood kind of how to attack those schemes better. What I do think this sends loud and clear, yet again, is a message that the Seahawks see themselves. This has been the big debate for the last 6 weeks, right? They see themselves as much closer to being a contender than they do to having to rebuild it. And while they're willing to accept this first season as a transition, they're disappointed that they're not playing in the playoffs. And the edict was handed down by ownership to John Schneider when they made the change to move on from Pete Carroll, that we aren't going to take a step back. We aren't going to rebuild. We are going to win. And what this does, I think, in a couple of different ways, I think it establishes very clearly the vision that Mike Macdonald has. And there were reports that his preference last year for offensive coordinator throughout the interview process was Arthur Smith. But when the process dragged on and it became evident that nobody was going to hire Macdonald before the Ravens' playoff run ended, and that the Seahawks were essentially waiting for him, that Smith got cold feet, I guess, a little bit, didn't want to wait, didn't want to risk being left out, and took the job with the Steelers. I think you look at Arthur Smith's history, what he did in Tennessee, what he tried to do in Atlanta, seemed like a much more logical fit to the style of football, the kind of complementary football, physical, being able to run when you have to run, when the other team knows you're going to run, being able to dictate terms and set a tone, that would have aligned more with him, an Arthur Smith type. But when he was finally hired, Mike Macdonald, on January 31st, late in the process, a lot of the big names that might have been considered were off the board. They tried to take another shot at Mike Kafka. The Giants, pulled that whole play calling thing on him. There were some other names that were looked into. Chip Kelly came in and interviewed, ended up going to Ohio State, and they go with Ryan Grubb. Grubb and Macdonald had no history together, didn't know each other, but they clicked. And if you remember the Brady Henderson report from about 6 weeks ago, that part of the interview process for Grubb was he had to convince Mike Macdonald that he could be balanced. Because when you look at his college resume, if you went back a ways to some of the smaller school stuff that they did, he and DeBoer, there was a lot of balance and a lot of success running the football. But once they got to Fresno State with Jake Haener, and then, of course, UW with Michael Penix, they really leaned into the downfield passing game. Had one of the best offensive lines in college football, had one of the best collections of receivers in college football, and an NFL quarterback that could sling it, and they took advantage of that. And it just seems like that's Ryan Grubb's DNA. That's how he's wired. I talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago. My concern was that, you can learn and you can develop, and I was hopeful that he would, because I just didn't think they were going to pull the plug on it this soon. But sometimes guys are just wired a certain way, and it's just not in their nature. And working together every single day, Macdonald just obviously became convinced that he wasn't the right guy. Now, the only thing I take away from this is positivity. Because as I said on the show yesterday, even if the announcement today had been, hey, we're sticking with Grubb, he's going to be back next year, we're moving forward with him, I would have felt better about his standing, because that's how much I trust Mike Macdonald and his football acumen and his football IQ and his desire to play a certain type of way. He's not going to compromise that. And if he had decided that Grubb was worth taking another shot at, I would have felt like, okay, I would have deferred to him. He sees something in him that he believes in. But by this decision today, clearly he believes that the best thing for the organization is to find another coordinator that more aligns with his philosophies. That's a positive. Like, he's going to get his guys in there. And he might not be done. Now, the next question, and we discussed it last night again, is, are he and Scott Huff tied at the hip? They'd been together for the last 8 years, I think it was. They were kind of a package deal when they came here. That one sounds like it's yet to be determined. Macdonald did say on his coach's show today that they did sort of come in together, but now Scott's a Seahawk. But he also mentioned that everything is still kind of on the table and being evaluated. So that may not be set in stone yet. I found this interesting, just to throw this out there. When Bryce brought up the idea yesterday that, would the Seahawks be open to a reunion with Andy Dickerson? He was let go, was part of the offensive staff in Cleveland yesterday. Very highly regarded young offensive line coach who was our offensive line coach, came to us with Waldron from the Rams. Just an interesting idea to throw out there. Or maybe they've seen enough from Scott Huff and they want some continuity in that offensive line. Let's talk about some possibilities. And those possibilities, this list of guys that are available on the job market may grow by the day as we are in the midst of Black Monday, coaches being fired kind of left and right. But just connecting some dots, some things that we know, and then there's a lot that we don't know. But Mike Kafka is a name that I think is going to come up again for obvious reasons. The Seahawks had 2 interviews with him for the head coaching position last year. After they hired Macdonald, they tried again to reach out to the Giants and get permission to interview him for offensive coordinator, and the Giants refused, saying that he was going to have play calling duties this year. He did not, but it's just, it's a loophole that's easy to exploit, and the Giants did just that. There are reports this week First of all, today, Brian Daboll and Joe Shane were told by their owner, Walter Mara, that they're staying. They're safe. But Kafka may be a guy that has to take one for the team. Reports that he might be let go by Daboll, in which case he would obviously be available. Did they feel that highly of him, think that highly of him last year, and do they still think that way? They certainly seemed to a year ago, so he would be one possibility. Doug Peterson is an interesting one in the sense that he was just let go by the Jaguars today. He's a free agent. He's available to interview with anyone. You know, there's none of the guys on this list except for Mike LaFleur and Tanner Engstrand would be subject to the rules that prevent Seahawks from interviewing certain coaches during the playoffs. Peterson has connections to the Northwest. Grew up north of Seattle for a time. Don't know how strong those are, how much those remain, or even if he is open to going back down to being a coordinator again. He's had 3 head coaching jobs now in the NFL. He might just consider himself done. I think there was some talk when the Seahawks looked into him 3 years ago or 4 years ago when they hired Shane Waldron. I think it was in that cycle that they may have even had formal interviews with him at the time, but that he might have been considering retirement then, and that was before he got the job with the Jaguars. Brian Schottenheimer is one that Corbin Smith brought up a couple of months ago and would be a polarizing decision because I think Seahawks fans remember during his time here, certainly the 2020 season when Russ got off to the great start, the first 8 games, Seahawks were undefeated, let Russ cook. He was getting MVP discussion. And then the offense kind of went in the tank that second half of that season. There was all the talk about how teams started playing 2 high safeties against us, took away the deep ball, and Schottenheimer didn't know how to adjust. But if you go back and look at the last 10 years of Seahawks offense, Schottenheimer coordinated the 3 best during that span. And a guy that certainly was hired the first time by Pete Carroll to establish a physical running game, and that's his background. And that whole coaching staff in in Dallas, their contracts all expire in about a week. So they'll all be free agents unless they choose to sign sometime between now and then. Mike LaFleur got to call plays yesterday against the Seahawks. He's a guy that was really highly thought of 5 years ago, the first time he flew the coop and left the Rams, took the job with the Jets. That only lasted 1 year. He's been back under McVay now for a couple of seasons. I suspect that by letting him call plays a couple of times, he did it once last year as well, that they could invoke that same loophole to keep him if the Seahawks asked for permission. But then again, Sean McVay is usually very, very supportive of his guys going on to take jobs elsewhere. So unless he has other opportunities, that might be one that the Seahawks will at least look into. Jake Peetz is the in-house guy. Another one who has experience under McVay in his coaching tree, came over this year to be the Seahawks passing game coordinator. You've heard Bryce talk about him a lot. He has heard that they're very high on him. That could be the easy move. In that case, though, we wouldn't know what we're getting other than pedigree and the influences that he's studied under because he's never called plays on his own. Tanner Engstrand is interesting. There was some talk last year that the Seahawks might consider him. There may have even been an interview. He's a passing game coordinator in Detroit, though. I would suspect that his preference would be to stay in Detroit if Ben Johnson takes a head coaching job this offseason and stick with that program and take over for him. Others that are out there because they've been let go but have respect around the league and are known to have coordinated balanced offenses and had some success running the football. Ken Dorsey, who I think interviewed with the Seahawks in the past as well, and Alex Van Pelt, a guy who has Green Bay ties, and that may be a connection that kind of ties him in with, makes him appealing in some way or might give the Seahawks some insight because of John Schneider and his connections there. I want to get to your comments and your reactions and your analysis, but first let's do this. This episode brought to you by the folks at BetterHelp. I am a big believer in personal growth and development, and therapy is a big part of that. When I was young and my parents got divorced, they sent me to see a therapist for a couple of years, and I thought it was tremendous in just learning some coping skills, learning to get through those developmental years through high school. It helped to have someone to talk to that was unbiased, right? If you've ever considered therapy, now you can do it from the comfort of your own home. BetterHelp is completely done online. You can just fill out a brief questionnaire. They match you with a licensed therapist. If you don't like that therapist or you don't feel like it's a match, you can switch to another one at any time for no additional cost. And right now, my viewers and listeners can get 10% off their first month with this unique URL, betterhelp.com/forever. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/forever for 10% off your first month with some in-home therapy from the folks at BetterHelp. And then got to give a shout out to my favorite apparel company, Doer, Built for Doing. And what they specialize in are materials that are breathable, antibacterial, sustainable. You may have never heard of this company. They're based out of British Columbia. They have flagship stores in LA and Denver, but I'm telling you, this is quality stuff. I love their stretch jeans. You see them right there on the screen. They have 20% stretch in them. They're incredibly comfortable. They almost feel like joggers, but they wear like jeans. They're built tough. They're built to last. They're moleskin shirts right here. I've got two of those, incredibly soft, incredibly comfortable, very versatile. You can wear them in a number of different applications. And right now, you can get 20% off your first order from Doer at shopdoer.com/forever. It's spelled DUER, Doer, Built for Doing. To take advantage of this deal, shopdoer, DUER.com/forever. All right, I want to get to your reactions to everything here. Bunch of comments, bunch of you watching. Happy Monday. I'm going to put my glasses on for this because this is some pretty serious stuff, you guys. That's when we know it's serious, is when the glasses go on, right? Right off the top, hello to Bryce Coots. Gives me an opportunity to tell you about our new YouTube channel that's launching at the end of the week. It's called The Pick Is In, and it'll be completely focused on the NFL draft, not Seahawks specific. We're going to start off with a full mock draft for the entire league, and then we'll go from there. Really excited to get that started with Bryce, and looking forward to it. If you guys have watched Bryce's content, my content, you know what draft nerds we are, and now we're going to combine our nerdism on that. Mike says, morning 12s, how you doing? Mike wants to let us know that we're awesome. Always appreciate that. Let's see. What do we got here? Tasha says, well, I don't think it was a bad idea to release Grub. I just hope the next OC hits. This revolving door of OCs has been frustrating. It's a good point. And if you remember last year at this time, when the Seahawks were looking for a head coach, the debate was, do you go offense or defense? And the problem, if it is one, is if you hire a defensive-minded coach, he has to nail the OC hire. And then if you nail the OC hire, that guy's probably going to get poached and get a head coaching job in a couple of years, right? I file that under a good problem to have. But it's a problem that it's an issue all around the league. And there aren't that many elite play callers. And if you need evidence of that, it's this. Ben Johnson is just finishing his third full season as offensive coordinator and play caller of the Detroit Lions. He is the longest tenured offensive coordinator in the league. And it's been 3 years. That shows you the turnover, either because they're getting fired if it doesn't click, or because if it does click, they're getting head coaching jobs. I mean, Bobby Slowick is getting head coaching interviews again, being reported this week, even though he didn't impress anyone enough to get hired last offseason, And his offense in Houston took a step back this year. The pool just doesn't seem to be as strong as it used to be. But yeah, that blew me away when I heard that today, that Ben Johnson is the longest tenured coordinator in the NFL. I do think that it's likely that they hire someone with experience calling plays, someone with a tangible resume. And it might not be a resume that you love, because the thing about offensive coordinators and play callers is they've almost kind of like head coaches. Most of them have been fired. They've either been fired somewhere else or they've never done it before. And so it's either easy to look back on their resume and go, well, I don't know about that. But it's also, it's easy to get sucked in by the allure of something new and shiny. But a lot of first-time play callers fail. This isn't the first time we've seen someone be one and done, even in the last 20 years in Seattle. You remember Pete Carroll's first season. Jeremy Bates, one and done. And then he hired Darrell Bevell. Hopefully, Darrell Bevell helped win us the Super Bowl. So hopefully they'll do just as good a job of replacing Ryan Grubb here. And I want to say this too before we get too deep into this. Ryan Grubb's a really, really good dude. Had a chance to chat with him a little bit. I love listening to him talk about football. He's really smart. I think he's going to land on his feet. I don't think he's going to be out of work for long. I think he'll probably go back to college. That's what makes sense. And maybe right now is not a great time because a lot of the staffs are filled out. But when someone like Ryan Grubb becomes available, a program will make a position for him. Like, just off the top of my head, there's why couldn't this be a possibility? Bill Belichick hasn't filled out his whole staff in North Carolina, has he? Josh McDaniels hasn't taken that job yet. Now that Gerard Mayo's out in New England, there's a lot of rampant speculation that the reason they made that move so swiftly is because they wanted to get in on Mike Vrabel. And if Mike Vrabel gets that head coaching job, if Josh McDaniels still wants to be in the league instead of college football, maybe he goes there with them. And maybe Belichick goes, hey, I'm going to go hire the offensive coordinator that was just had his team in the college football playoff final a year ago. Just a thought. I don't think he's going to be out of work for very long, and I think he'll probably go on to have a tremendous career in college and probably end up being a head coach there at some point. Tasha says we haven't had an offensive identity since Marshawn Lynch. Some people will say, and I have seen some of this feedback already today, like, hey, how can Grub be the guy that loses his job over this when he didn't have a chance because of the offensive line? But again, I think there are things you can do to work around not having an elite offensive line. I think you can lean on the quick game. You can be better in the screen game. And you can run the ball more consistently. He just got away from it. I think his biggest failing this year is that streak on first drives, which is now 21 games long, which means that for his entire NFL career, if he never calls plays again in the NFL, he went his entire career, all 17 games, his 1 year, without scoring a touchdown on his first drive. And that's when you have all the advantages. That's when you get to script and spend the whole week game planning that first 10, 15, 20 plays with all of the benefit of knowing your plan and what you're trying to attack. And he wasn't able to score a touchdown on any of those first drives. It was a huge part of the failure of this team to play complementary football a lot of weeks because they played from behind too often. When they got a lead, you saw how Macdonald would turn things loose on defense and how much better this team was. I mean, that applies to every team, right? You play from ahead, it gives you advantages on defense and allows you to kind of milk the clock away and run the football. But we just didn't see enough of that. Don Hester, thanks for the super thanks. Thanks for the super thanks and the thanks. I appreciate you. Michael Centalonza, am I saying that right? Hire Frank Reich. He's 63 and won't be getting any head coaching offers. My understanding is when his name came up last offseason is that he's just done, that he's just not interested in coaching football anymore. He'd be interesting, but and I don't think there's any connections with him and the staff that would. Does he have any connections to Leslie Frazier? They both have Buffalo connections. Could that be an allure? He'd be the kind of guy that I think Macdonald would be interested in. Someone where he's experienced, he's a veteran, just run the offense. I can just leave it with you. I don't have to worry about it. I can focus on the defense. I did feel like later in the season that Macdonald was getting a little frustrated with how much he had to try to impart his vision on the offense. It was like he was trying to impose his will on Ryan Grubb to get that offense to where he wanted to get them. Tasha says we'd be rolling the dice again, excuse me, in a first-time play caller for the third time in a row with Jake Peetz. I'm ready for a proven seasoned NFL play caller. I do think that's the direction they're going to go. Although, for the record, Bryce Coots is a big Jake Peetz guy and has been saying he thinks he's going to be the guy. So I just want to put that on the record in case he's right. We want to give him all of the credit. Amy says, I loved what Mike Macdonald had to say today. I think we're going to learn more about him this offseason than we did, obviously, his first offseason. There was a lot of, you could feel it as it was happening. You could feel him growing into the job and learning along the way. And sometimes it kind of felt awkward. Like, and I'm talking about not in terms of the X's and O's, but just like having to learn to manage the entire scope of the job rather than just focus on your one specialty. It seemed like it took him a while to get comfortable with the media part of it, having to talk to the media so often. I think we're going to see exactly what kind of team he wants to build. And if this, for those of you that are worried about the offensive line and don't think it's ever going to get done because John Schneider doesn't commit to it or whatever your thought process is, we've seen a couple instances now of Mike Macdonald when he decides, when he thinks something's not good enough for his football team and he wants to change it, he lets it be known to the powers that be and he makes those changes. I don't like my inside linebacker play. Okay, within a 2-week period, I'm going to let you get rid of both of your inside linebackers, both your starters. I'm going to go out and get you a good one and let you roll forward with the guy that I went and got and the rookie. And now this is another one where less than, not even 24 hours, 18 hours after the end of their last game, he's already making big moves like this. I don't think he's going to mess around, man. He wants to earn some downtime this offseason, be able to spend some time with his wife and his new baby, but he wants to get the offseason rolling and set a tone. And I think, making this move right away does that, sends a message, but also obviously gets you out in the job market sooner to where you can start getting in on some of these guys. But also, Bryce makes the point here, the O-line's the next big area that needs to be addressed and not like how it's been in previous years. If Mike Macdonald goes to John Schneider and says, I need that to be a focal point this offseason. We need to build a good offensive line. I need reinforcements there. Then I think they're going to make it happen. Because as I said on the show last night, John knows that his seat's getting warm, if not downright hot this offseason. And he knows that's the biggest weakness on the team. He's going to try and fix it. But for those of you, I'll keep saying this all offseason until I see something different happen. For those of you who think the answer is to keep Charles Cross and flush the other 4 out and get 4 new players, it's not the way to build a good offensive line. In the last 4 years, if you go back to Abe Lucas's year and Charles Cross's year, they've spent a first, a third, 2/5 and 2/6, something like that. Am I close? On offensive line help. 2/3, because Christian Haynes, along with Abe Lucas. They've spent resources. They have a bunch of young guys that they kept on the original 53, even though they didn't think they were going to play this year. And they ended up playing in LeMaya and Sundell. But they felt good enough to protect those guys. Even Mike Jarrell falls into that category because they didn't want to risk losing them on waivers. They thought there was some development there. And then those guys, the second half of the season, actually got to play together week in and week out until Lucas missed week 18 because of the abdomen. And so they're not just going to flush all those young guys out. They believe in some of those guys. And I suspect the approach is going to be, let's keep it together. which is why I also think they might lean towards keeping Scott Huff. It may just be one upgrade, maybe two if a lot of you get your wish. But I think they're still going to give these guys a chance to develop. So who can we get in here to help them, to bring a scheme that takes pressure off of them, either through helping them out, chipping, more 12 personnel, or by running the football physically, mixing it up more with balance? Because how many times this year did we see the Seahawks in obvious passing situations not even present the threat of the run? Not a great position to be in as a quarterback because you want more support than that. But it doesn't help out your offensive line either. If it's 3rd and 6 and you go empty, the first drive last week against Chicago, they run it for 48 yards. They're marching right down the field with Charbonnet and McIntosh between the tackles. And then they get down, what was it? It was inside the 9, and they were 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, and they go empty. So you're running the football, and now you have a chance to score a touchdown on your first drive for the first time in 21 games, or at the time it was 19 or 20 games, and you go empty. You just let the defense know, hey, you don't have to worry about defending the run here. An offensive coordinator can do a lot for your offensive line. Amy says, hit that like button. Appreciate that. Always got to remind you guys to subscribe and hit that bell for notification of future episodes. And all the other ways you can support the show are linked down below, as well as the link to the new channel this pick is in. Bryce reminds us that Pete's did call plays at LSU. And he's been a run and pass game coordinator. He does have an interesting resume. And he's been in the building for 10 months. So they know him. He could end up being the guy. Let's see. Here's a name that I didn't include. Sam Somerville says the McCown idea would be a fun thought experiment. Josh McCown, quarterback coach in Minnesota under Kevin O'Connell this year. Very, very well respected. I remember, was it the Houston Texans that gave him a head coaching interview 2 years ago when he hadn't ever even coached a position in the NFL? I just saw today he is getting interviewed by the Jets, I believe, for their head coaching job. But he's a guy that hasn't had a chance to be a coordinator yet. Again, so green. I think if they're going to go with someone that hasn't been an NFL coordinator before, that Pete's would probably be the guy because he has more overall experience and he's been in the house and they know him. Biggest thing this new OC must have is alignment and shared vision with Mike Macdonald. Needs to approach offense in a way that is consistent and sustainable and feeds into the identity. Got to be able to run the football. You know, when you go up against Shanahan and McVay every single year, you have to be able to run the football. Like we saw it a little bit yesterday against the Rams, where, you know, Rams had 400 yards in offense, and they did it mostly with checkdowns and screen passes. Like they just recognized that Mike Macdonald and his scheme is typically willing to let you have that underneath stuff, knowing that when it gets down to the red zone, they're going to stop you, or they're going to bow their backs at certain times and get to the quarterback, stop a drive. That he's okay giving that stuff up as long as he's not giving up explosives and getting stuff and getting beat over the top. And so, you know, getting an offense that can put drives together consistently, run the football, burn the clock, just puts that defense in a better position, right? Works more hand in hand. Amy says, MM was talking all about alignment. I think that'll be his buzzword going forward. He does have his buzzwords, doesn't he? He does. He has quite a few. He loves his sayings. I mean, Pete did too, though. Pete made a living with sayings, wrote a book with sayings, right? Carly says, hope all the best for Grub, and I'm happy we're moving on. It was interesting. Dave Softy Mahler from KJR, local sports radio station, legend. God, how long has he been in this market now? 20, 25 years. Ran a poll last night asking if people thought that Grubb should get another year. And it was 80-something% yes. I was surprised by that. But then when you consider that a large part of his fan base are diehard Huskies, because he is, they may have just been a little bit more forgiving because of Grubb's history with UW and the success that he had there. Carly says, I saw 100+ messages in my Seahawks Discord and knew immediately it had to be Grubb. You know what kind of ticked me off? I actually found out because I got a notification from Seaside Joe that he put an emergency newsletter out that Grubb was out. And what stinks about that is I missed out on about a half an hour. I was behind the 8 ball a little bit here because I had just spent the first 3 hours of the morning watching Good Morning Football, scouring Twitter, reading up on the firings, and then I had decided to take a little break from that, and I turned the sound down on the TV in the background, and I was on my laptop, and I'm starting to build a consensus draft big board. And that's what had my attention for about 45 minutes until I noticed my phone go off and realized that the Grubb news had broken. So I apologize for being a little bit slow to hop on air and get to you guys and react. Let's see what else we got here. What do we got, you guys? Now people are jumping into what's next. What's next for the off season, right? Let's see. Dan Lowe Music says we need a left guard. Olu played pretty well in his first real action. I believe Haynes will have the NFL strength next year and be much improved, and Lucas is good to go. I agree with this. Talked about it a little bit last night. I think left guard is the focus. It's not going to be Lake and Tomlinson again. There could be in-house answers, depending on where guys feel more comfortable. Like Anthony Bradford could be back in the mix again. And although he's played right guard for us, he played left tackle at LSU. He could be, if they feel like Satao Lamea has kind of got a hold of that right guard spot or he's more comfortable there, they could leave him there. They could try Bradford at left guard. We've seen Haynes play both guard positions. We've heard reports in the last couple of weeks that Haynes has worked at center in practice, which is interesting because he worked at center at the Senior Bowl last year and reportedly looked good, that some teams thought that might be his best position. You've got all these draft picks invested in these young guys. They're going to be in the mix. So that's why I keep saying that you've got a lot of young talent to work with, and they've gotten a chance the last half of the season to work together finally and get some continuity, and we saw it get better. And so whether it's through free agency or first round of the draft, if you can just get one really good, I mean, if it's in the draft, you hope it's a guy with an all-pro ceiling, especially if you're taking a guy in the first round. If it's in free agency, you just want to find, in my opinion, you don't have to sign Trey Smith. You don't have to sell the farm. Just get a really good, solid, dependable player. A young guy ascending, cool. You're going to have to pay more for him. That'd be great. But if you could just replicate what the Lions did with Kevin Zeitler last offseason. Same age as Tomlinson, much more accomplished player, hadn't lost a step like Tomlinson had. Tomlinson was an all-pro player 3 years ago. But then he just really dropped off. Went to the Jets, and his game just has never been the same. Zeitler hasn't lost a thing. If you can find a guy like that, I'd be okay with that while these young guys continue to develop. But you don't need to clean house, and you shouldn't. To me, that would be a gross misuse of resources if Schneider were to just say, I need to go sign 2 offensive linemen in free agency and draft 3 more and get rid of all the guys that I've picked in the last 2 years. That'd be a horrible misuse of that office, if you ask me. See, I don't really understand this philosophy. And maybe I'm jumping in without context. Thomas Cox says, we'll see when next Christmas comes around and it's the same thing all over again. Like, I just, why would you think that it would be? Why would you think that it would be? This is an organization that wants to win badly, is committed to winning. That's why this move was made today. If they just wanted to be all touchy-feely, feel-good organization and kumbaya and everything, they would have kept Ryan Grubb. They want to win. And Mike Macdonald clearly, even as much as he comes across as a really nice guy, and that's been my experience in meeting him, when it comes to football, he obviously does not give a F. All that he cares about is winning. Jerome Baker, you're a really good dude, and I know we paid you in the offseason, but you're not cutting it. You're gone. Terrell Dodson, I know you're our leading tackler, but you're gone. Ryan, love you. I know we had beers together at Dino's. You know, personality-wise, I think they clicked. But that's not the kind of offense I want to run. It's not the kind of offense you promised me. You're out. Things are different. Expecting that they'll just be the same because they've always been the same is just a weird kind of way to look at it, in my opinion. To each their own, right? I don't know. Looks like some people got into a conversation about air raid. Let me see. Now you guys are getting into like who's gone next. Janth says, I guess Thomas says so because Huff is still there. Again, if they determine that he's the best guy and that they like what they've seen from him, then stick with him. Continuity is the talent, obviously. Okay, talent's the number one thing, but continuity is a huge factor in offensive lines playing together. Again, I use that example of the Green Bay Packers and that offensive line that just manhandled us a couple of weeks ago at Lumen Field. Not a single first-round pick or big money free agent among them. All day 2 and day 3 picks. And so it took a couple of years, and then they came together. Not a Pro Bowler among them, but a very effective offensive line. What do we got here for a Hawks green guitar pick? Do I have a? I don't have any green ones. Unless you see something I don't. Maybe somewhere. Let's see. Ryan Thresher just got in here. Does Dan think Pizza's going to get the nod? Any outside candidate on his mind would really like to let someone who has called plays and proved to be at least competent. Yeah, Pizza's in the mix. That's Bryce's favorite. Wait. SL Hazard says Dable just got fired. So that's taken a turn. Can I confirm that? Breaking news. Do I still have? No, I don't. I don't have the breaking news sound. Okay. Hold on. Looking for the Dable news. I know this is scintillating entertainment at the moment, right? Huh. Well, the Bears are interviewing Mike Kafka for their head coaching job. And Drew Petzig, which is weird. Wow, I'm not seeing the Dable news. Yeah, Janeth says he's been retained. Yeah, that's why I thought that was wrong. Yeah, their owner came out today specifically and said they're retaining Dable and Joe Shane and that they're both on the hot seat. That he said something like, "I better be in a much better mood this time next year." Yeah. This is how close this season came to being much, much different, right? Kevin Kirby says, it's just sad because Murphy made one huge mistake this year that cost us the division. And I know what he's talking about. I wouldn't say it's a mistake. That face mask was just him trying to make a play. He wasn't intending to grab Sam Darnold's face mask or not. Yeah, there were a couple of plays in that game. The Trey Brown offsides, lining up on the line of scrimmage and then giving up a touchdown play on the next play. The Rams game when they in overtime, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, couldn't get a yard. There were a number of instances where they had opportunities in games. The Giants game, they're marching and a chance to get a field goal to tie it and go into overtime, and they were playing better, and maybe they win that game and they get the field goal blocked and run back for a touchdown. And the Rams game, again, Geno throws 3 costly picks. They were close. They were close in those games, and they won 10 games without beating a good team. I mean, they beat the teams they were supposed to beat, and they came really, really close to beating some good teams on their schedule as well. Yeah, it was close, and I think they could feel it. And I think they had to feel walking off that field yesterday that Rams team that's going to the playoffs isn't that much better than them, even at full strength, and that they really missed an opportunity this year, and so they're going to make the changes that they have to make it work. This is going to be a really, really exciting offseason. You know how geeked up I get about this stuff. The team building stuff is almost as much fun, if not more so, for me than following the team during the season. I talk about this all the time. The offseason has a different cadence to it. You get up every day and you have to check Twitter. Like, what happened today? Did we sign someone? Did we cut someone? Did we trade for someone? Did we hire a new coach? What direction are we going? It really makes things interesting. And cannot wait to cover this draft season as we move forward. Can't wait to find out who they hire as a coordinator. That gives you different ideas about maybe what types of players they'll target, depending on scheme and some of their history, right? Really, really fascinating. I just want to make sure that I don't miss out on anything from you guys. Almost 700 of you watching in here at the moment. Really appreciate all of that. Big shout out to those of you who contributed for the Senior Bowl trip. I will be heading down to Mobile from the 26th to the 1st. I'll be there all week, covering all the practices, all the media availabilities, watching all those guys up close, taking a real close look at all the offensive linemen down there. I assure you, I'll be watching them as closely as I can. The quarterbacks, certainly, but there are tons and tons of draft needs. Let me do this. So I was going to anyway later this evening, and now I'm having second thoughts about whether I'll do it live or not. So it may be a pre-recorded show. But I'm going to do my first offseason Seahawks mock draft later tonight. It'll probably just be a 3-rounder. I'm just not intimately familiar enough with the class to go much beyond that. But we'll get started on that. So a couple of reminders. And these are all really good reasons why you should just subscribe to this channel and hit that bell so you never miss out on notification of new episodes, because I will be covering the draft and the entire offseason, all the process, free agency, as diligently as anyone who does Seahawks content. I will be at the Senior Bowl that entire week doing content every single day. I'll do lives every night after we wrap up the days down there. And immediate reactions to practices, and then certainly a full wrap-up of the game. There is the pick is in, the new YouTube channel that Bryce Coots from the Hawks Zone Rundown and I are going to create and get started. It is created. You can subscribe to it now. That link is down below. And we'll be doing draft stuff around the whole league, and then on each of our own individual channels, you'll still always be able to count on tons and tons of Seahawks draft content here. Doesn't look like I really missed out on anything new. Really appreciate you guys getting in here. Any other names that I didn't mention? Let me put that up again, because some of you joined late. These are just the initial, the first snap comments. candidates that I just thought initially. Mike Kafka, obviously, Seahawks interviewed him for head coach and offensive coordinator last year. Doug Peterson, just fired by the Jaguars, has extensive experience as a successful play caller in the league and has ties to the Northwest. Brian Schottenheimer, the former Seahawks offensive coordinator, his contract expires in Dallas in about a week. He'll be available, a guy that has a long history of running the football. Mike LaFleur flamed out in his one shot as Jets offensive coordinator, but they're so dysfunctional, wouldn't hold that against him. Went back to the Rams. He was the one that called plays yesterday. Sean McVay gave that opportunity to him as he called plays for Jimmy Garoppolo and the Rams offense yesterday. They may try to block that move, may not want him to go within the division, but he's another intriguing name. Jake Peetz is in-house, Seahawks passing game coordinator, another McVay guy. Tanner Engstrand is going to get a lot of buzz this offseason, although if Ben Johnson takes a head coaching job elsewhere, he will likely be the first choice to just stay there and take over that position. And then I threw out some other names. These guys have been fired recently, but have histories of running balanced offenses and running the football. Ken Dorsey, Alex Van Pelt. Any other names that you guys can think of that I missed out on? I wonder if Chip Kelly would still have interest, if he thinks that getting back into the NFL as a play caller is something he wanted to do. The Seahawks interviewed him last year. He decided to go to Ohio State. Maybe that was just the job he took in the moment, and he has aspirations to come to the NFL. How about hiring Chip Kelly and then drafting Will Howard? How about that as an idea? Got another suggestion for Frank Reich. Would like to wait not too long to see if Stefanski or Steichen become available. Not sure on Peterson. Stefanski isn't going anywhere. I mean, he fired his offensive staff. I think that was probably one of the olive branches that he kind of offered ownership, is like, look, I'm going to make some changes. But I think with the quarterback situation there, I think he gets another year. Steichen's interesting, although I kind of think he might be a little overrated. You know, he had a good year. He wasn't that dynamic of a play caller with the Chargers. Then he had the good year with Jalen Hurts with the Eagles and turned that into a head coaching job, but he hasn't really gotten anything going there in Indianapolis. Not sure about Steichen. Kelly, not a good coach, just asked Shady McCoy. I mean, that was 15 years ago, right? Something like that. It was a long time ago. And he was the head coach then. And he was trying to do something that had never been done in the NFL in the way that he operated his offenses. Coaches evolve and change. I wouldn't just, disqualify him because a former player didn't like him because he ran hurry-up offense too often. Stefanski's being retained, already reported. And then there's going to be names that we're not thinking of. Certainly. All right, you guys, let's wrap this up. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever. As always, be sure to subscribe to the show. And again, look for another episode tonight. I will be doing my first Seahawks mock draft, a 3-round mock coming up, sort of an ideal mock draft later this evening. Let's go out the proper way here. No.
Kobe's a great example.
No. Let's write. It's the right button. This is what you got to love about the live stuff. Okay, here we go. It's my first time doing this. I'll get the hang of it at some point. Thanks again for watching, you guys. Forever and always, go Hawks. Until next time, I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. We'll see you then. There we go.